Today, we are talking about communicating with your team more effectively to get the absolute best performance from them. Listen in to interact with everyone in your law practice better. Hello, my friend. Well, I've got a great guest on Be a Better Lawyer here today, and I'm going to introduce you to her in just a moment. But first, I want to ask you two questions. Question one, do you want to be more productive so you can get more work product out the door and off your desk? Question two, do you want to feel less stressed about time and have more of it to do things that you love and not just working? If you answered yes to either of these questions, I want to let you know about something special I have created for you. It's a guide called Three Sneaky Problems Stealing Your Time and Productivity and How to Fix Them Now. It's filled with actionable tips that you can actually implement right now. I created it to introduce you to the concept of timepiece. Timepiece for Lawyers is my one-of-a-kind program that helps lawyers feel more in control of their time and feel more peace. It's not open for enrollment yet, but I want to invite you to join the interest list so you are the first to know when it opens. When you sign up for the interest list for Timepiece for Lawyers, you will also automatically get my new guide, Three Sneaky Problems, Stealing Your Time and Productivity and How to Fix Them Now. I wanted to give you instant results with this guide. I wanted you to feel better about your time and like you were in control of it right now. So I've designed this guide to give you actionable steps. And by the time you finish this guide, you're going to have tools to immediately calm stress and overwhelm with simple tweaks. You will improve your productivity with an easy exercise that I give you. Plus, you'll discover one of your biggest blocks to productivity and create a plan to bust through it. You can grab the guide and be the first to know when Timepiece for Lawyers is open for enrollment by going to dinacataldo.com/timepiece. That's PEACE. That's dinacataldo.com/timepiece. PEACE. All right, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, everybody. I have a really special guest for you today. Penny Zenker is a speaker, business strategy coach, and productivity expert who has more than 20 years of experience founding, running, and scaling multi-million-dollar organizations. She's written a book called The Reset Mindset that Stephen Covey said gives a simple method for responding quickly to the changing needs of people, markets, and stakeholders, while at the same time increasing trust through mindful touch points. She has also done a TEDx talk that has been viewed over 1 million times. I have brought her on here. Thank you, Penny, for being here to talk to you about teams and team building and leadership in your practice. Welcome to Be a Better Lawyer, Penny.
Thanks for having me, Dina. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I also want to make sure that we plug your podcast because you have a podcast of your own. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. It's called Take Back Time, which we just had you on. So that's how we also met and had a great conversation. And it's in the top 2% podcast worldwide. So, and we talk about everything about working smarter. We cover different realms of resilience and business building and team building, leadership, different topics.
Yes, I was very excited to have that conversation with you. So I know that after our conversation there, that we had a nice little segue into talking about teams and team building and some of the problems I've seen when I talk to lawyers. And you have lots of experience in this as well. So I wanted to bring you on to get your perspective and to give that to our listeners here today, because I know that there's so many lawyers out there who are stressing about their teams and they're maybe don't have the skills that they
Mhm.
need to manage themselves so that they're managing their time and their energy and managing a growing team. So I wanted to ask you, just as a foundational point, when you work with companies, what do you see as some of the biggest problems that come up when you're talking to them about their teams?
Well, you kind of just mentioned one. One of the biggest problems is people say they just don't have time to lead. They're so busy, right, trying to accomplish the goals and the tasks in their role that they're overwhelmed. And so, they start to do things that break down trust, unfortunately, as a result. So maybe they cancel their one-on-ones. Maybe they set up a meeting and then they don't show up, or they show up late, right? And so all this pressure and all the things that they have going on without really recognizing it, it's having a ripple effect, a negative ripple effect on the people that they're working with. So it breaks down trust. So building trust is an issue, and creating alignment is an issue. It's also another major thing that I see is that people in the team say that they're really struggling with competing priorities. And what that tells me is it's not just them who can't set priorities. They're not given the authority and the criteria that they need in order to determine this is more important than that, right? And that comes from a leadership perspective. So those are some of the top ones, that I'm seeing.
Yeah, that is exactly what I see with lawyers who, especially when they try this at first and they say, "Okay, well, I'm going to try to set up a meeting every week." And then they don't show up for the meeting and then they say, "Oh, you know what? I just don't have time this week. We'll put it off to the next week." And then they wonder why their assistant or their associate doesn't really think it's going to happen, doesn't really plan for it, doesn't even expect it to happen because there's been this breakdown in the belief that you're actually going to show up for your meeting and that it's actually going to be a productive meeting when you're there. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so tell me when you're working with leaders in these kinds of the positions that you've worked with, tell me where you start foundationally with them to help them understand, where they are and how to even get to the first step of where they want to be.
Well, you and I are very similar in one of our approaches. Is the first thing is let's look at where you're spending your time today, right? Because that tells you what you're prioritizing and what's important to you. And very often it's not in alignment with the things that really do matter most, the things that move the needle. So that's one of the things is to do a time audit and really understand where people are spending their time. And it's also to step back and look at the goals and objectives and what are, you know, the most important areas that are moving the needle. So what we forget sometimes is we get so lost in the tasks and the doing that we aren't as focused on the impact and what moves the needle. So that's the other thing that I start with them is to understand, okay, let's clarify your goals and let's make sure those are the real goals and that, is everyone aligned with those goals? Because sometimes even within an executive team or maybe a group of partners, right, is everybody truly in line with those goals? Because if not, everybody's kind of working towards different things. So, how do you know that you have alignment? Um, and then understanding what are the levers that drive results towards those goals. Because then you can identify a gap. Here's where you are spending your time. Here's where you need to be spending your time, and then going after it, right? And making sure that it filters down through the team so that sort of everybody has a line of sight to be able to say, I know why my work matters and how I deliver towards that higher goal and objective that we're working towards. And that gives somebody more meaning, more capability, right? When they know the big why and the numbers that they're working towards, then they can also be given the ability to make decisions as to, okay, this, yes, and here's where we're going to minimize and compromise, because they're going to have to be areas where we minimize and compromise if we want to get to the things that are most important.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point there. So, if the leader is not aware of their goals and has clarity around what is most important, the team is going to flounder. and they are not going to be as productive as you want them to be. They are going to even feel disconnected from the overarching goal of the company. They're going to feel disconnected from maybe the leader, and they're not going to feel fulfilled in their job because they're probably going to feel a bit lost. They're going to be doing whatever they think is in front of them that needs to get done versus maybe the most important thing only because the leader hasn't articulated for themselves and clarified for themselves and then communicated what their priorities are to their people. So, what do you find
Well, can I
is,
interrupt there for a
yeah,
second? So
please.
what I find sometimes is that they think they have communicated. They go,
Yeah, that's true.
I have told people what they should focus on. We have communicated
Yeah.
the numbers, but I can't tell you, especially the more change, challenge, and uncertainty that we have in our workplace and in the environment, the more we have to communicate, the more we have to check in to make sure that people are, because things also change dynamically. The priorities can shift, maybe not the overarching goals, but the day-to-day priorities. And very often there's a mismatch in what the leader thinks is necessary in terms of communication and what the team feels is necessary. A great example of that is in the area of feedback. Um, 53% of leaders feel like they're giving enough feedback. And I don't remember the statistic exactly, it was in the 60%, 64% or so of people feel that they're not getting enough feedback.
Hmm.
And this number I do remember, and 39% of people are um, are actually feel like they are not important in the organization
Mm.
because they're not getting that feedback. So that's a great example where there's a complete mismatch of what leaders think and what's actually being represented. And that's just one more point on that is that uh, when when there's a mismatch like that, it's a leader's responsibility not just to communicate, but to ensure that it's received
Mm.
and that everybody has what they need in order to feel good at the company, to feel like their work has meaning, to feel like they're contributing, and that they are actually productive. That's a leadership's responsibility, and they need to be responsible for not only what they say, but that it's received.
Yeah, and I do want to make sure, for everybody listening, we're not just talking about a partner or somebody who owns a firm, but if you have an assistant that you work with regularly, this is you. You are in a leadership position. And I'm glad you brought this up, Penny, because something that I see a lot of is, lawyers will tell me, but I've told them 1,000 times how to do this thing, and they're still not doing it the way I want them to do it. But the way that it has been communicated is often disrespectfully, often
Mhm.
in a rush because the lawyer is, overwhelmed themselves. They're not taking moments to communicate and then hear that feedback back from the assistant. And then ask them questions like, hey, how's your bandwidth right now? Like, how are you doing right now? And, I'm really curious about, what your thought process was when you did this project because it didn't turn out the way that I expected it to. So I'm trying to figure out what your thought process was. So, in order for us to be effective leaders, we have to ask questions and really
Absolutely.
have a conversation, not just tell somebody, hey, do it this way. You're not doing it right. Try again.
Right. Feedback doesn't only go from the senior to the junior, right? It's give me feedback. What's working, what's not working. But and I want to say that it's also this is true for our family, right? Our relationships at home and everywhere is that it's not just about what we say, it's how it's received. Because
Mhm.
a good way to take it outside of the work relationship that people can relate to is take your children, for instance, right? You can say certain things until you're blue in the face and they're not listening. They're like, nah, 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 you know, because they weren't, we have to create rapport and make that connection first, that emotional connection so that people are with us, right? We know that in a sales conversation, they talk about rapport all the time. It's the first thing that we need to do. Just because someone works for you or you have a relationship with them, what I found is doesn't mean that you instantly have rapport, right? Everybody's in a different emotional place or understands the what what's expected of them. But if I feel like someone's yelling at me or talking down to me, I'm not listening because I'm focused on how I feel about the energy that this person is bringing to me. So, we've got to hit that connection first, make sure that we've got rapport in the moment, and then be able to bring that forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a conversation with one of the lawyers in my Timepiece for Lawyers program recently, and he started implementing weekly meetings with his assistant. And he hadn't done that in the past because he thought he needed to have this open door policy where, he was constantly available so that their employees could get more done. We can get your 2 cents on that in just a second. I have
Hmm.
a feeling everybody listening knows my opinion on that. But when I heard that he started doing that, I asked him some questions about it and he said, "Yeah, I'm actually getting to know my assistant better. I feel like I have this opportunity to talk a little bit more with her and get to know her on a personal level and it creates that bond. It creates that relationship when you're designating time for somebody and you're able to communicate what you need, it also puts you on the same page. So you start getting on the same wavelength and things start to smooth
Hmm.
out because you're having regular communications with them and not just kind of these short, snappy conversations. Hey, how do I do this? Hey, do you need this? What is this? Da, 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 da. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a couple different things. So first off, like what you were saying about the energy exchange and whatnot, I think we could think of it like a bank account,
Mm.
right? If you're constantly withdrawing from the bank account, there's going to be a point where it's empty, right? And you have no more goodwill or money or whatever you want to call it, trust. If you're not consistently, and every time you respect someone, you show them trust, you're putting back into the bank. You're making that connection, right? So that you can take out when you need to take out. So sure, you can be short sometimes if you're tight with time, but that's because you put into the bank over time. And I think that's
Mm.
maybe an easy way for people to think about it is it is an exhaustible resource, somebody's goodwill. And if you're not respecting them, that's very quickly going to empty the account.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also as to the open door
Yeah, I'm
policy,
going to
which
talk
I
about
hear
that too.
a lot of lawyers think they can't close their door. And so I do a lot of coaching on, hey, it's okay. You can close your door. And then we
Of
talk through all
course.
their fears. But what's your experience with this in terms of the leaders that you see? Do they have the same sense that, oh, I need to be available all the time?
Um, I'm not seeing that necessarily, but
Mm,
they're almost never available, a lot of the people. So I think there's extremes, which
mm,
is interesting, right? They're either just never available and constantly pushing it off and things like that. And then those who feel like, their door is open, you can contact them anytime. But that's a distraction. They're not getting any of their quality work done. So it's better for and plus they're not giving their people the authority and the what do you want to call it? To allow them to solve their own problems, right? If they're
yeah.
going to go to every fix and every little thing, then they're not going to develop the critical thinking skills that they need in order to solve their own problems and find answers to what it is they're working on. So otherwise, they can collect them and share them at the open office hours or however they want to do that. But I find an open door policy is not good for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that was coming to mind, ooh, I might have just lost it. But I was, let's see if I can get back in the rhythm here. But when I was thinking about this, I was also thinking about it in terms of the energy that you expend not teaching your people how to think like you. Like if you're not teaching your people to think like you, either with SOPs, standard operating procedures, right? Or
Mhm.
having some like having some system in place so that they could say, okay, this is how I think about this problem. When I see this problem, I look at problem one is the priority, then problem two is the priority, and then problem three is the priority. And so when you approach this particular problem, break it down this way and how you're thinking about it. And so often lawyers kind of do it piecemeal and just say, do this part, and they don't necessarily explain the whole thing. So I guess an
Right.
analogy would be to, let's say you have an associate who is writing a brief and arguing a brief, and you're not necessarily saying like, I want you to think about this brief in these particular ways, these particular arguments, and this one's the most important argument, and then this one's going to be the secondary argument and the tertiary argument, right? So it's not teaching them how to think through that problem. It's kind of letting them just kind of figure it out on their own, and we don't want that.
Yeah, no, that's what many leaders do though, is they'll just hand out the tasks
Hmm.
without giving the bigger picture, without understanding the whole context. And what it does is it stops people from being able to think through the problem. They
Hmm.
just do what's given to them. And so I think, like you said, whether it's an SOP that lays out exactly the process, or whether it's an overview of the objective of the project and the case, and giving that overview, because when people know the big picture, they may have a different way to approach it as well. Maybe there's sometimes it's great to follow an SOP, and sometimes we have to know when to go away from the SOP because it's not working for this particular situation or to reach that particular goal, right? So sometimes it's too granular, and it's skipping a step, or we want people to also to be creative thinkers and to be able to think on their own and not only follow something that's there, but to have that as an important guide. So I think there's both sides, right? There's having that description, but if everyone thought the same, then you're not going to get any. Maybe there's a new way to argue this, or you know what I mean? Something I don't know the ins and outs of legal projects, but if I'm going to hire somebody for my team, I want to show them here's the checklist, here's the SOP, here's the overarching client and what they're trying to achieve. And I want them to bring their creativity. I want them to say, you know what, this step doesn't make any sense. I know that we may have done this for 3 years because that's what the person before me always did, but here's why it doesn't make sense. They can actually think through the whole problem because they know the big picture.
Yeah. And I think this also speaks to the importance of having those weekly meetings, even if they're just 20 minutes, because you're going to have the opportunity to say, hey, what's coming up for you this past week? Was there any confusion in this past week? Just this morning I had a meeting with my assistant and I said, hey, this is what I'm seeing with this particular system you're introducing into the mix. These are some problems that I see. What problems do you see? What was your thought process in creating this system so that I can understand maybe there's a benefit to this system that I didn't see because I
Mhm.
am not all knowing. I need to be able to I want to be able to have that collaborative relationship with my assistant. And then we can say, all right, well, this is the system as it is. Do we want to just play with it and go with what it is? And then we'll just tweak it as we go along. But we can't have those kinds of conversations if we're not putting time aside and honoring that time with
Mhm.
our assistant or associate so that we can actually move the business forward.
Yeah,
Um,
you want to empower your people, right? And
yes.
and meeting them, hearing them out, listening to ideas, challenges, and avoid any mismatch of expectations. That's where frustration comes in. Frustration not addressed through these mismatch of expectations becomes actually sometimes in this employee leadership type of role, it becomes bitterness,
Mm.
right? So I have this sort of 4 stages of engagement that I talk about, and people will show up in the beginning when they first get there, and they'll conform and they'll do your SOP because they're just learning, right? So they're going to show up, and and that's an eager showing up. It's not a negative. It's they're going to show up, and then they're going to speak up. Now they feel more comfortable. They're going to speak up. They're going to share their ideas. They're going to share things. When you shut them down or don't give that opportunity, right? Then they're going to shut up.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're getting apathy. You're getting, you know, people who are at work but not fully engaged type of thing. And then you're going to get the shutdown, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
I'm done here. And then it's shortly thereafter that they're leaving, right? So when you aren't hearing people sharing their ideas and speaking up in some level, you should be concerned.
Yeah, and I mean, you want to have employees who are engaged, right? You want people who are interested in the work that you
Mhm.
are doing, interested in helping you achieve your goals, because ideally, when you're hiring them, you're also ensuring that these are people who want to be engaged, want to have these conversations, want to speak up and say, yes, I see room for improvement here, and you're collaborating with them to create something.
That's right. And that's
I'm
what the new generations want as well.
Yeah.
They want to be able to be a bigger part of what's going on. And so if you're denying that, then those people are going to be looking elsewhere.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I love the fact that I think you and I, since we do similar work in a lot of ways, that we have this kind of built-in mission that people that we work with are interested in contributing to, interested in collaborating with. I know that I've had conversations with my assistant and I know that he's like, "Yeah, you're changing people's worlds. Like you're able to help people." And to be involved in that kind of change is something that's exciting for a lot of people. You don't want to just like go into work, clock in, clock out. You actually want to be a part of something.
Right.
Yeah. I'm curious when you were talking about emotional intelligence, right? That came up. I want to talk a little bit more about emotional intelligence because I think, based on my conversations with lawyers, that as lawyers, we're very focused. You're the focusologist, right? So, it's like, okay, you're focused on one particular goal that day. I've got to get this deadline out, I've got to get this thing done. And you're not necessarily in that moment thinking about how you're coming across to other people. You're just so one minded that everything else kind of goes off to the side. So
Right.
I'm curious what your experience with leaders is in that capacity and how you have talked to them about emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. Well, just to make it clear, the focusologist is all dependent on, I define focus a little bit different. It's not
Sure.
just attention on
Of
that one
course.
thing. It's about being intentional, right? Controlling and directing the energy of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions to produce positive, meaningful results. So to me, a focusologist, one of the core principles is emotional intelligence, so that you're emotionally intelligent by able to step back for yourself. So my reset practice has 3 steps, and it helps us for ourselves to step back away from the emotion, from the biases, from the way we've always done things. That's step one, so that we can kind of detach a little bit. And that's an important part of emotional intelligence to recognize, hey, I've been triggered here, right? So awareness in this step back phase is absolutely key to practice and practice. Be a professional noticer is what I say.
Mm,
Become a professional noticer. And then that way you get to kind of recognize this. Oh my goodness, I was just triggered. And you're not like, you're just kind of observing yourself sometimes, like, okay, I've got to step back here because I'm noticing it. And the faster you notice it, the faster you can shift it.
yeah.
And then you need to do that for others as well. Notice when they're triggered, when they're, uncomfortable, and be noticing that as well, so that, you can step into the second step, which is to get perspective, meaning, what am I missing here? What are some other ways that I can communicate this, since it's clearly not getting across in the way that I meant it? Uh, how else can we look at this challenge, right? So perspective can be a number of different things depending on the context. And
Mhm.
then lastly is to realign and refocus, right? Reprioritize. And so it's so key for, you're talking about how do I deal with those people who are just like head down and not looking at anything. Notice you need to slow down. You need to take what I call these reset moments to check in with yourself. Is this still the most important thing? Check in that, you recognize that somebody's struggling. That means your team is just as important as this thing that's happening. How could you take a simple moment to show them that you care? It
Yeah.
doesn't always mean that you have to, emotional intelligence isn't that I'm going to need to sit with somebody for a few hours and hold their hand or let them cry on my shoulder or,
Mhm.
but, let them know that you care. Maybe it's simply stop by their desk and say, listen, if you need to take the afternoon off, that's okay. Or, um, depending on the what the person's going through or the situation, or just to say, hey, I heard you're having a hard time. How can I support you? Is there
Mm.
something we could reallocate? Like having a conversation showing that you care, right? It clearly it depends on the context of the situation, but it can showing you care can happen in a moment. Send, give a handwritten card that
Mm.
shows that you care. It meant so much to me when I was at home. I was actually working at a company when my father had passed away. And it meant so much to me, all the people that reached out. It didn't take a long time, but they reached out to let me know that they cared. And that meant a lot to me.
Yeah. It's so funny. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about when my father passed away and I was like, oh, okay. I went back to work and you know how some people ask you how you're doing, but they don't really want to hear how you're doing. They're just kind of saying it to say it. And
Yeah.
so I could tell the difference.
Yeah.
And when I had somebody ask me like, how are you doing? Like it was a very present moment with this person where I knew they actually wanted to know how I was and I felt comfortable sharing how I really felt with them.
Mhm.
And it's so important, like your reset practice that you described is being in the present moment with people. It's being in the present moment with
With
yourself.
yourself too. Yeah.
Yeah. And really starting to pay attention to how you feel and have those real conversations with people that aren't simply superficial, just passing the time to be polite kind of things. How's the weather? Versus like, how are you doing? Like, I know you're going through something right now. And I want to be here for this moment. It doesn't mean that anything more than we're just having this moment right here.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, you know, that how are you doing? Let's get rid of that
Hmm.
because it doesn't mean anything. Right? It's like a greeting. Hey, how you doing? Like you don't really care.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
you know,
like, that kind of thing is
but
not yeah.
even if you come to say to somebody, how are you doing? Maybe there's a better way to show that you care. Like this must be hard for you to be back. Something that creates a little bit more of a connection first, right? So,
Maybe, I mean, in this particular case, it worked for me.
right.
So, it really maybe it depends on your delivery too.
Right, because you knew that they really meant it.
Yeah.
I guess what I was trying to say is to help people to know that you mean it or to get into your own heart when you ask
Mm.
it is
Mhm.
maybe there's that connector to how are you doing? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Oh,
that it
yeah.
helps to bring you into the present uh in that context.
Yeah, and it really does depend on your relationship with that person. And
Yeah.
if you're a leader, bringing it back into the leadership context that we were talking about, it's so important that you know your people in the context of your work, but also that you have some kind of understanding of is do they need a little extra support, right? And it may not even be anything like we're talking about here, like emotional support. It might be that they're learning a new skill
Mhm.
and they don't have the knowledge base yet to perform at the level you'd like them to. And so to keep track of them and watch them and be curious and ask them, hey, do you need some support here?
Yeah. And I find also, people many leaders, they'll say, well, I asked them if they needed help or they needed any support. A lot of times people won't admit that they need support
Mm,
or they need help. So we also need to find other ways to recognize and ask in different ways so that it gives people permission to say, yes, I do need some support or some help, right? That it is a challenge again, a mismatch where they're like, yeah, I asked them whether they needed help and they said no.
Mm.
So it is,
Yeah. Do you have
those are
some
some of the more
suggestions?
delicate areas. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you have some suggestions for that?
I think it's mixing up the questions, asking. So, for instance, the words that we use in the language can hold with it different meanings. So, do you need help? Some people don't like the word help. It makes them feel helpless, right? If they say,
Mm.
yes, I need help. But support might be a better word to use. How can I support you? Um, what do you need in order to be more successful or to integrate faster? Uh, Also, another thing I would say is how do you feel like it's going? Why don't we rate yourself, rate how you feel on a scale from 1 to 10? So a lot of times that gives you a scale too, as to it's something I use all the time, especially, as a coach, right?
Hmm.
You want to ask people, did like at the end of a coaching session, for instance, and this could be a leader subordinate type of or a team member meeting where you could say also, how was this meeting for you on a scale from 1 to 10? Did you feel like it met your expectations and your goals?
Hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So rate this meeting together on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the best and one being the least. Or how confident do you feel moving forward with this software and this process on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the best, one being the least. Now you get something, you get a baseline, you get a better understanding than if somebody says, how do you feel? And you go, okay, but
Yeah.
maybe that okay is a 6. Okay, great. Well, what else could we do to give you a higher level of confidence? So it opens up, an ability to see where they really are and then ask another question.
See, I like that because it's also bringing them into the collaborative process of even
Mhm.
creating these meetings. And it was something that I like to do is I have a Google Doc that I have every week that I share with my assistant and we collaborate on what's going to be, the topics of conversation in that meeting. So I'll have the ideas that I want, he'll put in his ideas of what he needs to ask me, and so then we have collaborated and created it together.
Yeah, you
Um
create an agenda together.
yeah, one of the things that I have seen with lawyers who are starting to introduce some of these concepts that we've been talking about here, meetings, collaborative meetings, these kinds of SOPs, bringing these kinds of things in, is that they may not get the warm welcome from their staff that their brain expects them to have. And I'm curious what experience, if any, you have around that and how to address that.
Can you ask that again? I'm not sure that I fully understood
Yeah.
that
So
question.
so one of the things that I've noticed is that lawyers often think, okay, I'm going to do this. I've got this. I'm going to start new meetings. We're going to do a collaborative process. They're excited about doing these meetings, but their staff isn't necessarily excited about the meetings. They don't necessarily even know what the meetings are for because they've gone for who knows, 5 years without these meetings, and now all of
Okay.
a sudden their boss is saying, "Hey, let's have a meeting." And they're not necessarily as excited as maybe the lawyer is about it. So I'm curious if you've had these kinds of experiences where the leader is implementing something new and the staff is just kind of confused. They're showing they may show up, but they may not be as excited as the leader thinks they should be in quotes.
Right. Well, I mean, first, hopefully they're communicating what's the purpose of the meetings,
Yeah.
right? So that's the first thing is the reason why we're going to be initiating these new meetings is because I realize that I've let you down over the last, it's also okay to say I've realized I haven't been giving you the opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. So we're going to talk about status every day or once a week, and that's going to, whatever the purpose is of the meeting, so
Hmm.
that that's really clear. They should understand what's their role, what's the leader's role of the meeting. Also, any other expectations, that maybe the leader says, I'd also like to hear your feedback. I'd like you to contribute, like you said, with your people, like you to help build the agenda every week so that they know the way that it's going to work. And if that person had been leaving and not showing up to meetings and things like that, then basically it's okay that the others are skeptical.
Yeah.
And you get to show up and prove that to them that you're going to show up every week and that you're going to do what you said. So the worst thing is to say you're going to do something new and then not follow through consistently. So I guess, the big thing would be, what do they need to do to set themselves up to be consistent in the way that they run these meetings? So maybe they need to put an extra 30 minutes in their calendar somewhere to prepare for those meetings to make sure that they're ready and prepared. That will
Yes.
build more trust, right? As opposed to coming and then being like, oh, what are we going to do anyway? And, why are we here? Do you have anything for me? Right? Then it's not useful.
Yes, absolutely. Put in that extra time. I like to say when you're doing something like this, that you need to market the meeting, right? If this is a new thing that you are introducing into your practice, it's up to you to market it. They don't have to be excited about it. It doesn't really matter, but you do want to have your your foundation for it. It's like, okay, we're going to have a meeting this week. The reason we're going to be implementing these meetings is because I'm noticing that there's some time deficiencies happening, not even on your end, but on my end, and I want to make sure that we start being a little bit more efficient with our time, and this is our ability to do this. Or I had another client who was noticing that one of her assistants wasn't necessarily doing those things, doing some things in her litigation practice that she wanted done a certain way. And she couldn't necessarily take, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there to review each of these documents with them. And so she was taking this work on herself. So instead, what she did is she turned her meeting into a review meeting so she could say, all right, we're going to have an hour every week or every other week. And we're going to just review the documents that you prepared together. And what she's noticed is that her assistant has vastly improved her abilities to complete these documents because the leader has taken the time to show her exactly how she thinks, and she's gained practice of it over and over again in these meeting sessions. So meetings don't have to look one particular way. You can
Right?
do them in a way that makes sense for your particular practice and the needs of your practice.
Absolutely, right? Because that created a greater sense of accountability because she knew every week they were going to be reviewed. She felt cared for, that she's getting that feedback. We talked earlier about, the statistics. People want the feedback. They want to do a better job. They want you to be happy, and they want to feel like the work that they're doing is meaningful and productive. So that those are perfect types of things, right, to do. Even
Yeah.
to sometimes to shadow the leader, or for the leader to shadow the assistant, or whoever else is on the team, and be able to give that feedback from the shadowing, right? Or to document a process. You can have meetings to over time that we document these processes. So like you said, a meeting doesn't have to be in any specific kind of way. It's just to address a particular opportunity or challenge or improvement.
Yeah. So for all the lawyers listening, just know you have so many processes right now that you're keeping in your head, and you're not allowing your people to really get a handle of, whether it's your intake processes, whether it's, having conversations with clients, whatever it is, you have that in your head, but you could be having these moments where you have an opportunity to either standardize a weekly meeting, have them sit in with you on your intake session so that they can take notes, so that they can understand your thought process. And then you have maybe 15 minutes after that intake process to then share with them, this was my thought process throughout that intake. Do you have any questions? Tell me what your thoughts were, so that you can actually have a little back and forth with the people that you're working with, and they can gain better, a better, oh, I forgot the word. What was the word, Penny? Better, not accountability, but better. they know more what they're doing. They feel stronger in the sense of their abilities when they have that ability to speak to you about the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives them that space to ask those questions because sometimes we, as experts in whatever we do, we don't know why we do it and we don't
Hmm.
even think about it. We just do it. And so when someone watches us or has to do an SOP, right? They by having that ability to ask that person right there, hey, I saw you do X. You know, why did you do it? Sometimes we need to know why so that it sinks in and we and then we're better able to execute it when we understand, like you said earlier, like the bigger picture. And that time to ask questions is so valuable.
Oh yeah, 100%. Penny, this has been such a great conversation. Do you have anything else you want to add to this conversation before we wrap up?
Uh, no, I don't think so. I mean, one of the things I just talk about is, is just coming back to, let's say, the emotional intelligence, is just making more reset moments, these moments where we step back, get perspective, and realign, whether it's to recharge, whether it's to reprioritize, to realign with our team. These reset moments, the more chaos and the more distraction we have and the more that we need to take these moments to come together and pull ourselves together. So just make more reset moments, put them into your process flow, right? These meetings that we're talking about, those are reset moments to get in alignment on how to do these documents or perform this process or whatever. So just take a step back and look at all of your processes, look where things are breaking down and look to where you can put them into these moments, whether they're meetings, whether they're check-ins with people spontaneously, just really be more intentional about taking them.
So good. Can you share with everybody listening how they can connect with you?
Of course, they can go to my website, which is pennysKeynote.com, Pennys keynote.com. They can also go to the resetmindset.net. I have my book came out in September, The Reset Mindset. So that's definitely a great option for people. I was on the USA Today's national bestseller list and gotten, like you said earlier, with Stephen Covey and Mel Robbins and a number of other really, really great people who have endorsed it, and I'm sure people will find a lot of value in it.
That's so fabulous. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so definitely go check out her book. I'm going to link to that in the show notes. I'm going to link to the website she just mentioned in the show notes. And I just want to thank you, Penny, for coming on and sharing your wisdom with everybody here. And I look forward to speaking to you in the future.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Penny Zenker as much as I did. She is a wealth of wisdom, so I will link to all the links we talked about in the show notes so you can connect with her. I will also link to the guide, Three Sneaky Problems Stealing Your Time and Productivity and How to Fix Them Now. You can grab it at dinacataldo.com/timepiece or go to the show notes wherever you are listening to this episode. All right, my friend, I will talk to you next week. Bye.